Part 1, Chapter 7 of If All These Young Men by Romer Wilson. This LibriVox recording is in the public domain. Recording by Expatriate in Bangor, Maine. Part 1, Berkshire. Chapter 7, The Star. It was break of day, and yesterday's wet weather had sunk into the earth. In the east rose a star as bright as that which shone at Bethlehem. The calling of the birds woke Josephine, who was sleeping in the large garden room built against the front of the house with shutters and windows all round like a mansion in Japan. She drew back the shutters to let in the morning air, and through an aspen tree saw the morning star shining large and bright and silvery in the pale pink sky. She was sentimental enough to take prognostications from it, for she was as credible of the portents of the heavens as the lowest savage or the greatest emperor. She wished to run upstairs and pull Susan out of bed to look at it, but the Sharps were immune from sentiment of that kind, and she knew she would have had a good laughing at. She also wanted Susan to come and admire its size and brilliance. "It's the biggest star I ever saw in England," she thought. "How large it is! When it gets out of the aspen it will shrink, I suppose. In Hawaii the stars are as big as sugar plums." Morning rose around her, the morning breeze flowed over her, blowing the curls about on her forehead, and she felt very young. There were no Sharps, no Sebastians, no Blanchards, nor anybody here to trouble her. She was quite calm, like a sick child wakened out of a refreshing sleep, and lay with her eyes wide open, gazing out at the pellucid sky. Memories came back to her, not the memories of her own life, but of past times. She saw the horse race upon the fields of Troy again, and heard the elegant primeval warriors shouting as the fine horses threw up dusty clouds. The sun above and the pride of racing urged the horses and maddened the princes, till they brandished their javelins, crying, "Hi! Hi! Hi! Up with thee! Up! Up! Up!" as the pace ascended, and the slim cars jolted over the rough ground. In her half-dreams she became a barbarian prince herself, and as she stood on the step urged on her charioteer, then seized the reins, and hanging upon the mouths of the horses, whirled them past and stopped them dead in half 10 paces ahead of Agamemnon and Achilles and the rest. Her mind leapt, she saw the war in France, and thought how quickly the ages ran, and it seemed suddenly as if there were something in view which had been partially exhibited at long intervals since first the bulls were drawn upon the roofs of the Spanish caves. Silly thoughts spring up from the pillow of those who lie awake at dawn, and it is far more dangerous to stargaze in the morning than at night, for the senses are loosed from ordinary control, and are refreshed instead of tired, and the prince of the morning himself finds mischief for them. Monday began fair for Josephine, but it was not a profitable day. No sooner was she upon her feet than the war surged over her, but her high spirits at first swam her up to the surface. She ran upstairs into Susan's little red and black room to bathe in the dressing room beyond, and as she went through, woke Susan, then went into the bathroom feeling gay, and flinging herself into the water began to sing and splash about. The sunshine and the promise of spring, and that remoteness from life, which is lost with the putting on of clothes, made her happy, and she rolled and splashed and sang in the bath with as little care for anything but the moment as a child. Presently she cried to Susan, "I feel glad." But Susan was sad and irritable, and inclined to cry because she had dreamed all night about James Blanchard. The pride of chariot racing and early awakening had made Josephine intolerant. Not only had she fled across the plains of Asia, but assuming the starriness of Lucifer, had challenged Phoebus Apollo up the zodiac, and outracing him had waked out of her second sleep. She felt gay and glad and domineering and noisy, and springing out of the bath she wrapped herself in a towel and ran into Susan's room. Susan lay in bed flushed and hot, and all the early morning vitality of Josephine seemed to her unbearable and crude. "Cry baby," said Josephine, and kissed her. "What is the matter with my silly now?" "I dreamt about James. Oh, it is so dreadful," cried Susan, and rolled herself away in the sheets. "Well, well, well, there are dreadfuller things than dreaming about James," said Josephine, stroking her head, but Susan broke into sobs and would not allow herself to be comforted. "You must get rid of him if he makes you cry like this," said Josephine, taking her into her arms. Don't. Hush! They will think at breakfast that I have been horrid to you. You mustn't." Susan sobbed now as if there were no happiness left her but death, and clung to Josephine. But Josephine was in such a childish state, so far removed from the sorrows of the world, that she could only stroke Susan and murmur silly phrases which had little or no meaning in them. "No doubt it will work out," she said, "and anyhow one has to be brave." "It isn't any use. It isn't any use," sobbed Susan. "Well, it may be. Who knows? Besides, it's a lovely day," said Josephine. "Oh yes, the sun. I feel better in the sun," murmured Susan, shuddering. Josephine rocked her in her arms for some minutes and sighed, because she would have liked to have poured happiness over Susan, but Susan could not receive it. "What is it? What are you sighing for?" said Susan. "The war and all that," she replied, and rocked and stroked Susan again, until at last, by an amount of tenderness, she staunched Susan's tears, but when she tried to regain her own high spirits she could not. Clouds had gathered in her heart, and the fine glory of her morning was spoiled. End of Part 1, Chapter 7. Recording by Expatriate in Bangor, Maine.